In lectures, we'll have an opportunity to discuss and explore many of the ideas and tools and languages that are central to modern web programming. And through hands-on projects, you'll have an opportunity to take those ideas and put them into practice, designing multiple web applications of your own, culminating in a final project of your own choosing. Throughout the term, we'll cover a number of topics in this world of web programming, beginning with HTML5 and CSS3, two of the languages that are central to the understanding of web pages. HTML is a language we'll use to describe the structure of a web page, and CSS is a language we'll use to describe the style of a web page, the colors and the fonts and the layouts and the spacing that make the web page look exactly the way we want it to look. After that, we'll turn our attention to Git, a tool not specific to web programming per se, but that we can use in order to version control our programs, to keep track of the different changes we make to our web programs, and to allow us to be able to work on various different parts of the web application at the same time before merging those pieces back together. After that, we'll take a look at Python, one of the first main languages that we're going to be exploring in the course, which is a language that we're going to use in order to build our web applications. Specifically, we'll use Python using a framework called Django. Django is a web programming framework written in the Python programming language that we're going to use to make it easy to design and develop our web applications. Django in particular makes it easy to design web applications that interact with data. So after that, we'll turn our attention to SQL, a language that we can use to interact with databases, in particular looking at how Django allows us to use models and migrations to interact with data and allow users to interact with data all the more easily. Next, we'll turn our attention to the second of the main programming languages that we'll be exploring in this class, JavaScript, and looking at how we can use JavaScript to run in users' web browsers to make web pages just a little bit more interactive. In particular, we'll use JavaScript in the context of user interfaces, looking at modern user interfaces and exploring how it is that those interfaces work and how we can develop those user interfaces with a combination of Python and JavaScript. Next, we'll turn our attention to testing and CI/CD, or continuous integration and continuous delivery, which are tools that we can use and software best practices to make sure that we're able to design and develop code more efficiently. And testing in particular makes sure that as we make changes to our code, we're not breaking existing parts of our web application, by making sure that we have a whole suite of tests that we can use to ensure that our web application is always behaving as it should. And finally, we'll turn our attention to scalability and security on the internet, thinking about what happens as our web application grows larger. As more and more different users start to use our web application, how do we load balance between those people? And what do we need to change about our database to make sure lots of users are able to connect to our web application at the same time? Moreover, we'll look at the security implications behind designing our web applications. What might an adversary do if we're not careful? And how should we proactively be designing our web application to make sure that it's secure? But today, we begin our conversation with HTML and CSS, two of the languages that are foundational to understanding web pages and how web browsers are able to display those web pages. And we'll start with HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language, which is a language that we can use to describe the structure of the web page, all of the buttons and the text and the forms and other parts of the web page that the user ultimately sees and interacts with. Our very first HTML page is going to look a little something like this. It's going to be text-based code that we write that a web browser, like Safari or Chrome or Firefox, is then able to look at, parse, understand, and display to the user. So let's take a look at this page one line at a time and get an understanding for how it works. Even if you don't quite understand all the nuances of the syntax, there are probably a couple of things that stand out to you. You might notice the word title, which probably reflects the title of the web page, for example, which in this case appears to be the word hello. And then down further below, we see that we have the body of the web page that seems to contain the words hello world. So what is this web page actually going to look like? Well, let's take a look at it. We'll go ahead and open up a text editor. You can use any text editor you want.